I will not tolerate such behaviour. If you want to go out now, but if you stand again, I will order you out. Make your mind up. Either shut up and get out. I order... Shh. Neil Hamby, I am now naming you and Kenny McCaskill to leave this chamber. Sergeant, deal with them.
Breaking news, and this time it's not politics as usual. Britain just witnessed something no one thought possible, the fall of its own Prime Minister, taken down not by Parliament, not by voters, but by the Supreme Court itself. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. A unanimous 9-0 ruling, 107 pages of evidence, and the result, the most devastating legal blow to any sitting leader in modern British history. Sir Keir Starmer's government wasn't voted out. It was legally dismantled in less than a day. This wasn't a political defeat. It was an execution by the rule of law. The judgment read like an autopsy. Over $2 million in consulting fees quietly routed through Cayman Islands accounts. 4 so-called policy conferences in Dubai and Geneva that investigators found never existed. And the most damning link, a hidden donor connected to an $80 million government contract during the peak of Britain's energy crisis, while ordinary families couldn't afford to heat their homes. 9 justices, 0 dissent. Their verdict ripped through Downing Street like a wrecking ball, tearing down not just a government, but the illusion of integrity it stood on. And as the dust settled, one truth echoed through the halls of power. In Britain, finally, no one, not even the Prime Minister, stands above the law. It was the same energy crisis that had forced millions Britons to choose between heating and eating, and now it had come full circle. The very scandal that began in cold, struggling homes ended in the cold halls of power. When Chief Justice Dame Brenda Hale uttered the words, "No one, not even the Prime Minister, is above the law," it wasn't just a legal statement. It was a national reckoning, a reminder that even the highest office in the land answers to something greater than political loyalty, the truth. Within minutes, the shockwaves hit every corner of Britain. Parliament froze mid-session. Markets plunged. News anchors broke into live broadcasts, voices trembling as they confirmed what many thought was impossible. The government was collapsing. Live, on air. By early evening, Westminster looked less like a seat of power and more like a battlefield. Over 60 MPs demanded Starmer's resignation by 5 p.m. sharp. The BBC headline screamed "Government paralysed." Sky News called it worse than the winter of discontent. And on social media, the storm went global. That Starmer out exploded, hitting 40 million mentions in half a day. Inside the Commons, chaos drowned out authority. The Speaker's calls for order were buried under shouts, jeers, and pure outrage. Even Starmer's own MPs turned away, some quietly walking out, others staring down at their phones, unable to defend the man at the centre of it all. As night fell, Downing Street itself became a symbol of collapse. The gates swarmed with protesters chanting, "Resign now and justice for Britain." The fog hung heavy, police sirens wailed, and for the first time in modern memory, the British government wasn't merely under attack, it was consumed by its own disgrace. Number 10 went dark. Aides slipped into black cars clutching boxes of documents, faces pale, eyes hollow. The silence outside those gates wasn't just political, it was historic. A democracy watching its leader fall not by force, but by consequence. Behind the walls of Number 10, chaos wasn't whispered. It was screamed through silence. A single leaked message from a senior staffer summed it all up. He's not listening. He's furious. Those 6 words painted a picture darker than any headline could. Phones rang endlessly with no answers. Meetings were cancelled without notice. And through the night, aides described a Prime Minister pacing the halls, isolated, enraged, and unwilling to face the reality that his government was disintegrating around him. By dawn, even the betting market smelled blood. The odds of a snap election skyrocketed from 12% to 78%. Polls revealed something even more devastating. Nearly 70% of Britons, including a large share of Labour's own base, demanded his resignation. This wasn't just political collapse, it was moral exhaustion. The public had stopped believing in him, and worse, they'd stopped listening. And still, Starmer said nothing, not one word. In politics, silence can sometimes be strategy, a tool of control. But this wasn't control, this was surrender. His refusal to speak became its own confession, a wordless admission that whatever defence remained, even he no longer believed it. The longer he stayed silent, the louder the accusations became. And by the next morning that silence had turned into a roar. When Parliament reconvened, it was no longer a chamber of debate, it was a courtroom. Rishi Sunak slammed his fist on the dispatch box, declaring, "This isn't leadership, it's betrayal." The room erupted. Conservatives stood and cheered. The applause wasn't for victory, it was for vindication. Then came Nigel Farage, voice booming across the floor, calling Starmer morally bankrupt and demanding an immediate election before midnight. His words sliced through the tension like steel. The British people deserve better than this. Labour MPs couldn't move. Some buried their faces in their hands, others just stared blankly at the floor. The front bench, once crowded with loyal ministers, now sat half empty, a visual eulogy to a dying government. Documents were waved, accusations hurled, and in a single furious chorus MPs shouted, "Resign!" Centuries of parliamentary decorum crumbled in minutes. One backbencher rose, shaking with anger, and shouted, "He swore to uphold the laws, and he broke it." The words echoed through Westminster, through the cameras, through the country. And in that moment, Britain wasn't just watching politics. It was watching Judgment Day unfold in real time. The chamber erupted like a volcano that had been waiting years to blow. The fury inside Parliament spilled into every screen, every timeline, every living room. Within an hour, footage of the chaos hit 30 million views, 30 million people watching democracy fracture live. The headlines said it all. Westminster implodes. Even Labour's own inner circle knew it was over. Senior strategists privately admitted what the public already felt. The party's future is beyond saving. Behind the scenes, phones were buzzing, alliances were forming, and new leadership campaigns were already being drafted in quiet corners. The opposition didn't celebrate. They didn't have to, because what happened next wasn't triumph, it was reckoning. Outside, Britain itself was on fire, not with flames but with outrage. Tens of thousands flooded London streets, waving Union Jacks and banners that screamed "Corruption ends now." Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, and all united in anger. Traffic stopped, buses halted, cities froze. Police estimated more than 400,000 people took to the streets within a single day, the largest protest the country had seen in over 30 years. On Westminster Bridge, chants of "Resign, resign" thundered through the fog. One protester climbed a lamppost outside Parliament, shouting, "He betrayed us," as cameras captured the moment that would soon rack up 12 million views online. In Glasgow, citizens turned their fury into ceremony, staging symbolic trials, reading excerpts from the Supreme Court verdict aloud in public squares. One sign summed up the nation's mood. Justice has spoken. The people will enforce it. In Edinburgh, students marched through the night carrying torches, the glow of their defiance lighting the same streets that once echoed with hope. And in Bristol, a mural of Starmer was painted over in thick red letters, "Sold us out." Across social media, the outrage crystallised into history. Memes, comparisons, hashtags, and one line that caught fire. Downing Street is Britain's Watergate. Because for decades, the British people had complained about corruption in quiet frustration. But now, finally, they weren't whispering anymore. They were shouting back. For years, Britons had complained about corruption, but this time they acted. They blocked roads, halted buses, and filled the night sky with fireworks over Trafalgar Square. Tens of thousands sang "Rule Britannia" not as celebration but as rebellion, voices breaking with anger and disbelief. This wasn't the kind of unrest born from empty wallets or higher taxes. This was something deeper. This was moral fury, a nation declaring war on its own government. And the world was watching. As dawn broke, the headlines told one unified story: corruption. Every front page, every broadcaster, every anchor, the verdict was unanimous. At number 10, The Guardian accused Labour of moral collapse. The Daily Mail went further, printing a full-page headline that read, "The Fall of a Fraud." The Times called it the end of an era. Even the normally neutral outlets joined in. The BBC labelled it the greatest constitutional crisis in modern British history. The numbers told their own story. 9 million viewers tuned in overnight, record-breaking coverage for a political implosion. On Sky News, analysts looked stunned, and then came Piers Morgan, opening his morning show with venom. Silence is cowardice. Britain deserves better. His monologue went viral within minutes, echoing the national mood. The sense that this wasn't politics as usual. This was betrayal. Online, the imagery turned symbolic. Cartoons flooded social media, showing Starmer crushed beneath the Supreme Court's hammer. Hashtags like "Don't End of Labour" and "Justice Prevails" trended worldwide. Even Labour's friendly media allies backed away, refusing to defend him any longer. One BBC correspondent, caught off-air, muttered the words that defined the moment. "We're watching the death of credibility." Commentators compared it to Watergate, but worse. Because this wasn't Washington. This was Westminster, the heart of British democracy, now bleeding credibility in front of the entire world. The press had spoken, and their verdict was final. Keir Starmer was no longer Britain's leader. He was Britain's lesson. And as those words spread across headlines, markets reacted with panic. Within hours, the pound crashed nearly 5%, its steepest drop since Brexit. Screens across London glowed red. The economic shock wasn't just financial, it was moral. A reflection of a nation that had lost faith not only in its government, but in the very stability that once defined it. The political storm had already destroyed a government. Now it was devouring the economy. Global investors didn't wait for the dust to settle. They fled. London's trading floors turned blood red as billions vanished in hours. The London Stock Exchange alone lost £92 billion in a single day, a collapse so severe it rivaled the darkest moments of the Brexit fallout. Across the city, business leaders spoke with rare unity and raw fear. One called it a confidence collapse in slow motion. The Confederation of British Industry issued an emergency plea, urging politicians to restore stability before the economy itself unravelled. But inside Westminster, there was no stability left to restore. The exodus wasn't just financial, it was political. 8 shadow ministers resigned overnight, citing irreversible reputational damage. Their letters read like obituaries for a dying party. One line from a departing minister cut deepest. "I cannot serve a party that has lost its moral compass." A leaked internal memo soon followed, already outlining names for a leadership succession, as if the Prime Minister's resignation were a foregone conclusion. Behind closed doors, senior MPs plotted, negotiated, and waited for the inevitable. The chaos didn't stop at Britain's borders. International allies looked on with alarm. From Washington, the US State Department released a cautious statement, a diplomatic way of saying, "You've lost control." In Brussels, EU officials met in private to discuss what they were now calling post-Starmer Britain, a partner too unstable to trust, yet too significant to ignore. Meanwhile, the public paid the price. Mortgage rates soared past 6%, savings evaporated, and the British pound, once a global symbol of reliability, became shorthand for crisis. Families feared losing their homes, businesses froze hiring, institutions panicked, and the analysts stopped calling it a scandal. They called it what it truly was, systemic collapse. Behind the blacked-out windows of Number 10, the fall was complete. Insiders described Starmer pacing the halls, muttering about betrayal, trapped in the ruins of his own making. Only a handful of aides remained. The rest had fled, unwilling to be tied to the wreckage. Meals went untouched, calls went unanswered. The Prime Minister wasn't governing anymore. He was haunting his own downfall. Inside Number 10, sleep had become a stranger. One aide would later say, "He didn't sleep for days. He just stared at the door as if waiting for someone to come and arrest him." The Prime Minister of Britain, once the face of authority, now reduced to a man counting the seconds between dread and disbelief. Leaked documents told the rest of the story. Desperate attempts to contact legal advisers went unanswered. Calls ignored, messages deleted. Even his own lawyer reportedly refused the case, telling colleagues, "I can't defend the indefensible." Every door that once opened for power, now closed for protection. Behind the scenes, panic met paralysis. Rumours spread that he'd written a televised address to the nation, a final plea for forgiveness, but scrapped it just minutes before airtime. He couldn't face the cameras, he couldn't face the people, and when even his speechwriters walked away, the silence became total. Outside those walls, the world had already moved on. Former allies deleted photos, speeches were quietly edited, his name scrubbed from official sites as if erasing him could erase the shame. Labour MPs who once fought to stand beside him now pretended they barely knew the man they'd defended for years. And then came the image, the one that would define it all. Captured from across Downing Street, Starmer alone at a window, staring down at the chanting crowds. Behind him, reflected in the glass, the Supreme Court building, once the symbol of law and justice, now the very force that destroyed him. In that haunting frame, Britain's Prime Minister stopped being a leader. He became a ghost, a shadow of his own downfall. Beyond that window, the kingdom trembled. The cabinet fractured, half resigned, half pretending to govern. Behind palace doors, King Charles received hourly briefings but said nothing, choosing silence over intervention as the government crumbled in slow motion. In Westminster, rival factions plotted in the dark. Whispers of emergency rule, talk of unity governments, and demands for immediate elections filled the air. Outside, protest fires still flickered in the streets. The pound slid further. Businesses froze hiring. Families braced for impact, sensing something irreversible had begun. For the first time in modern history, Britain faced a paradox, a government without a leader, and a monarchy that dared not intervene. The world watched a kingdom on the edge, waiting to see who would rise from the wreckage. This wasn't just a scandal anymore. It was the birth of something bigger, the rewriting of Britain's political future. And as the smoke settled over Westminster, one thing became clear. This story is far from over. Because when power collapses this completely, someone, somewhere is already preparing to claim it.